Now let's take a look at using sentence similarity and being able to process our text. So first thing, in this notebook, I do recommend that you use a GPU, especially if you have very large video data sets. So I'm going to use a T4 with high RAM. It's totally fine to use that and not one of the higher GPUs. Let's go ahead and run the first cell, which will just tell us that we're using that GPU. And then while that runs, let's also go ahead and run the next cell, which will connect to Google Drive. And while that runs, let's go ahead and install sentence transformers, which is the library that allows us to do the sentence similarity. We can also go ahead and run the next cell, which will install the model for us. I'm using the default sentence transformer model. It seems to work fine for me. I haven't had any experiences with it working well or not, so we'll use that for now. While this loads, I also want to mention we will be using ChatGPT for this lesson. All you need to do for ChatGPT is create an account. You don't have to pay. The free version works totally fine for this. I don't exactly recall how many prompts you get with the free version, but you would need to, I think, do a lot in order to hit that number. So you're fine to use that for now. Looks like we're loaded. Still finishing loading there. Okay, so while this runs and finishes loading, which it just did, next thing we need to do is we want to load in our entire data set. The reason we want to do this now is that it takes a little bit of time to load in our model, and we don't want to do it every time, so we're going to start with that. So the first thing to do is to find our JSON data set. So for many of you, that will be drive, my drive, algo film, and then the video clips.json file. So just copy that path and paste that in here. I'm going to use this other data set that I've been building, which is of AFI's top 100 films. Not yet at 100, I'm at about 50 here, and this is a lot of data. So remember, the more data you have, the longer it's going to take to load. I'm going to go ahead and run this anyway, and then I'll explain a couple of these other cells. Don't run yours just yet, but I know it's going to take a couple minutes for this to load, so I want to go ahead and do this. Next is what we're calling JSON keys. So remember that you do need to have already run either the blip2 notebook, the mplug notebook, or the Whisper dialog extraction notebook. Because we are working with text-based data, we want to make sure we've loaded one of those notebooks and have saved that to our JSON database. If you haven't yet, go back and do that. I actually would recommend probably the Whisper notebook as the simplest and the fastest. The other one I might recommend is mplug. Mplug does require a higher power GPU, but because we don't have to go and convert stuff to frames, it's probably a little bit faster than using the blip one. If you did run blip, totally fine, but I think mplug is probably a little bit easier to use depending on the size of your data set. So this is now loading in our data set, and we are using, in this case, mplug as our text descriptors. So if we were going to switch this to the Whisper dialog, we would want to switch this and then rerun the cell, and that will again take a couple minutes to load in that dialog data. So make sure whatever you set here, you run it. If you change it, you do need to rerun the cell in order to load in that data. Okay, while this installs, because I remember it takes a couple minutes for this to run, I want to begin to play with what our setup is going to be here. So like with all these notebooks, we're going to start small, and then we're going to slowly build up. So I want to start by just testing with a single sentence, or maybe two sentences. So in this case, I sort of created the sentence that says, a man sits alone in his office, he appears tired. I think this is just a helpful sentence, and maybe what we can do is we can see what sort of data it provides. Now again, remember that in this case I'm using mplug, which is a pretty basic description. In fact, it usually starts with something like, in this scene, a man sits alone in his office. We could set up like that. It'll give us a slightly higher score, but it's not really that important because what we really care about is sort of that it's a man in an office and he appears tired, right? That's sort of the key thing. The other thing we could do, and maybe we'll look at both of these in just a minute, is we could ask ChatGPT to generate one for us. So let's say, describe in 2 sentences a scene from a movie, and let's ask what it does. In a dimly lit alleyway, rain-soaked and neon-drenched, a trench-coated detective cautiously approaches a mysterious figure Shrouded in shadows, exchanging cryptic words in a tense standoff. Suddenly, a gunshot pierces the night, casting a haunting silhouette against the wet pavement. I mean, that's a good sentence, but like that's a lot. I don't think we're actually going to get that out of our model, but let's go ahead and see what we get. So it looks like my model has finished loading. It took about 2 minutes, which is great. So let's go ahead and run this. So what this is going to do is this is going to take our initial man in the office and go through our entire data set and look at all of the mplug descriptions for that data set. What it's going to do is then use that sentence similarity and tell us what the highest scoring. It'll show us a couple videos. It'll show us the top 5 or 10 that match this description. Let's go ahead and run this. And I apologize, the formatting in this is not the best. In fact, let me add a line break here just so it's a little bit easier to read. But what you'll see here is at the top here is our initial sentence. And then what it's going to show here are a number of scores based on that. So it looks like, the highest scoring has a score of 0.675, and it says the image shows a man sitting in a chair in an office looking tired and sleepy. He is wearing a suit and a tie, and his eyes are closed. The room is dark with only a few lights visible. And that is from the movie Network. And then we'll see here, this is the path to that film, or that video clip. It looks like the next one is from In the Heat of the Night, and this is the image shows a man sitting in a chair in an office, leaning back and looking tired. He is wearing a tie and a shirt, and his hands are resting on his lap. The room is dimly lit. And if we go down further and further, we will see that our sentence score goes down to 0.66. So let's go ahead and copy this path from this first video. And we're going to paste that into the next cell. And let's go ahead and run this. And this is just going to show us what clip it pulled. Here we go. I wouldn't necessarily say he looks tired in this, but it is a man in an office, so good enough for us. Okay, so let's go back and look at the ChatGPT version. And let's paste that in here. And let's run this again. So this time here is our input sentence, and then what it says is the best match has a score of 0.65 and is from the film Rear Window. So let's go ahead and copy this path and let's paste this in here. It's probably a little bit of a longer clip. It takes a little bit longer to load. Definitely looks like a man in an alley, rain-soaked. There's no gunshot. There's no other parts, but it is a trench coat. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty close, but it definitely doesn't get exact, and that's why our score is a little bit lower here. So far this is working the way we want it to. So now let's try to build this up into more than just a single clip and actually try to generate maybe a scene or a series of scenes together. So next is we want to write a script. And there's sort of two ways to do this. One is you can just input the text into an open sort of paragraph. So if we were to go in here, we would take this first line and we'll delete anything in here and just put text inside of here. So again, let's go and ask ChatGPT to generate a scene for us. So let's say, so the thing to know about this is what we're going to do is we're going to split all of the sentences into individual sentences. So we want to ask for a number of sentences, and the number of sentences we ask to generate is the number of clips we'll combine. So let's go ahead and do this. So let's say generate noir scene in 10 sentences. And of course ChatGPT is going to do the funny thing of like sort of putting these all in this animated text like it's smart, but it's really just spinning it all back at once for us. Okay, so this generated a couple paragraphs for me. The thing I can do is I can copy this and I could just like remove the paragraphs, or I'd say like take the above sentences and put it all in one paragraph. God, I hate this animation. I wish I could turn it off. Okay, so that gave me our entire sentence here. The other thing to look out for is if you have quotes, we need to do what's called escaping. So if you do get something where there's a quote in here, I'll just fake this. Let's say there is something in quotes, the city streets right here. You need to do this thing. See how the text here turns black while everything else is red? You need to do what we call escaping. So if you do end up with quotes in your text, you need to put a slash in front of each of these. And you'll see that that works because it turns all of our text red. This is a little Python thing we need to worry about. If you don't have quotes in there, don't worry about it. As long as all of your text in here is red, then you'll be fine. So let's go ahead and run this. And this is going to split out. You'll see this took every sentence and split it into its own. This is called a Python list. So you'll see this format a lot as we go forward. And in fact, we could even tell ChatGPT to, hey, convert this to a Python list. So let's say convert the above into a Python list with each sentence being a new element. And now what it's given us is given us our entire output here. So we can copy this bracket to bracket. And what you'll see is below here, I have actually added this setup here. Now don't delete this script lines equals. Just go from bracket to bracket and paste that in. And again, if there are things like quotes in here, you will need to make sure you escape them by putting the slash in front of it. Okay? So now we have our script lines in here. Now, again, to save these, we want to make sure we actually run this cell. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to... oh, interesting. This... I see what I did here. Okay, so let's skip ahead a little bit. I've got other options in here, but what I prefer to do is just work off of this for now. So let's skip down to the process the script embeddings. And what we're going to do is we are going to run this first cell. And all that did is it encoded all of our sentences into individual sentences and embedded them using text embeddings. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to compare that to our data set. So let's run this. And now what this is going to do is this is going to take each one of our sentences. So at the very top here, you'll see our very first sentence. And what you'll see then is our top 10 matches. So in this case, quite obviously, we see Blade Runner, which will definitely have that noir feel. And you can sort of read the sentence and see that it matches so-so. And we have a score of 0.6486. We'll go on, and if you go sort of like, you know, blur your eyes and sort of go down to the next bracket here, you'll see that now we have our second sentence. And you'll see that it matches a film called On the Waterfront, another sort of noirish film. Scroll down more, and you'll see our third sentence, and you'll see where it matches. Now, you could go through each one of these and sort of see how well they match. You know, it looks like our scores are decent. This is kind of a bad one, 0.5, 0.6, 0.5, 0.4, so definitely low, and also it's kind of funny we're pulling in Star Wars. I guess Star Wars is kind of a noir in its own way. You know, but each of these you'll sort of see has a matching and a score associated with it. Now, I will say ChatGPT tends to generate stuff that has low scores or generally low scores because it's not really written in the same format that mplug is. And likewise, I would say if you're going to use dialogue, then you want to make sure that you tell ChatGPT to generate dialogue, because what it's going to generate in a scene description is not going to match dialogue. So you have to make sure your data matches up correctly. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the next piece, which is actually going to take all these clips, and it's going to pull in the best score, and it's going to generate a little video for us. So if we run this cell, this will just take all that corpus data and turn it into a thing we can now process using FFmpeg. And this next cell will output our file to a new MP4 file. So we can go ahead and use these dimensions work fine. You could also say, I think 1920 by 1080 tends to be about the right format for what we have here. And we'll go ahead and run this. Now this is going to take a couple minutes because we're processing 10 clips. Now remember, I specifically asked this model for 10 sentences. So that means it's going to be a clip per sentence. If I wanted 20 clips, I would say generate a scene in 20 sentences. So this is, you have to be somewhat explicit here in order to make this match the way we expect it to. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. When this is finished, I'll go ahead and show you what our output looks like. Okay, that finished processing. It only took a minute or two, which was nice. And let's go ahead and check out the video now. So I've got my video opened. I saved mine directly into Drive, so just open it in Drive to watch it. So here's our Blade Runner scene. You'll notice there's some audio issues where the audio drops out. I'll have to figure out how to fix that in the future. But for now, it does work.
$3,200. That's what he gave. $3,200 for a lifetime. Wasn't even enough to pay for the coffin. We gotta get out, girl. I don't.
All right, so there we go. So this now made a noir scene from other films, right? And it does have that sort of noir film feel. Kind of interesting. Again, is this perfect? Probably not, but it's fascinating to see how we can sort of generate these different sequences between these pieces. Now, I should also mention at the very end of this cell, there is also the option to output as an EDL file. So again, if you want to go in and actually edit out, like you notice there's some definitely like clip issues there, you could generate the EDL file and go in and clean up some of those pieces. So this is, again, able to work sort of in a more professional climate. Let's add some notes here for EDL file output. Okay, so that was just very quickly like generating a script and use ChatGPT to do that. One other thing I wanted to show, so I'm going to scroll back up a little bit, is I want to show how we can actually generate dialogue from, or like use our dialogue pieces. Remember how I talked about in the previous video, we go in and actually grab all the dialogue from this video and actually be able to see it and maybe combine our pieces back together. So this cell, this is right under where we added in our script lines. This cell will pull out all of our dialogue, but the problem is I don't have any dialogue saved to this file, so let me grab a different file that has dialogue in it. Okay, sorry about that. I had a couple errors in my code, so now it should work. So again, I do want to grab this JSON file and grab this. And now I can go ahead and look at all the dialogue that I've captured. So you'll see here is a bunch of dialogue. And if you'll notice, this is also in a Python list. So now I could go through here sort of Mad Lib style and copy and paste things myself. For just the sake of my sanity, I'm just going to pop this into ChatGPT. I think this will work. Let's see. So we're going to copy that entire block. You might have too much text in there. If you have too much, as I mentioned, one thing that's nice to do is to use slicing. So slicing basically allows us to take a certain section of this. So let's go 100 to 500. So it's going to take the 100th element of our dialogue and our 500th, and basically between 1 and 500 going to give us back the amount that we have. So if we run this, we now have 400 clips here, or now 400 pieces of dialogue. So let's go and grab this. And copy this. And what we're going to do is we are going to Let's create a new chat, and we're going to say, take this Python list of dialogue and create a coherent exchange between two characters. You do not have to use the entire list. Actually, let's do this. Let's say limit the conversation to 25 total elements. And then let's just paste in, whoops. Okay, yeah, so it says, hey, give me the Python list. So here's the list. Interesting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So it's clearly more than 25. Let's say redo this, but only have, what do I want to say here? Only have 10 sentences per character. Do not include the character before the sentence. Let's see if this works. I'm just trying to get this to format in the way that I want it to be, because I don't really want these bold things. I guess I could keep them because, to be honest, like, the sentence similarity thing is just going to skip it, but I think it'd be nice if we could get this in the right format initially. Yeah, interesting. So now I've got a different mess on my hands. Okay. This is kind of the problem with ChatGPT, is that it ends up kind of producing stuff that sometimes isn't what we want. Let's do this. Let's instead look at this dialogue and say, use the following Python list to create a coherent dialogue between two characters. Limit it to 10 sentences. Actually, let's say 20 sentences total. So we'll do 20 sentences total. Put the dialogue back into a Python list. Okay, this is not what I wanted. Again, the challenges of using, let's say, stop generating. All right, stop. Okay, let's try this again. Let's go back and edit this. This is more of a ChatGPT frustration than anything else. Let's go edit this. You do not need to use the entire list. Make sure the dialogue is coherent. And let's say regenerate. This is not a conversation at all. Okay, well, let's try this one more time. Create a dialogue. Create a conversation. Let's try something a little bit simpler there. Between two characters using the Python list below. Do not use all of the list elements. Limit the conversation to 20 total sentences. Put the conversation back into a Python list. Say, do that. And it's going to ask me, I hope, for the list. Okay, let's edit this. And we'll paste in our list, and then we'll hit save and submit. Okay, let's just do this. This is good enough for us. We can work off this. Okay, so we're going to come back here. We're going to come back to our Colab notebook. And we're going to say, inside our script lines, we are going to, the thing is, I need this in a Python list format. Convert this to a Python list. Okay, cool. Let's take this and let's put this in here. So obviously you can see it would probably be better to go through this yourself and create a coherent thing yourself. This is not very coherent. This is messy. Okay, the other thing we need to do is, because we're using our dialogue, we need to make sure that our model that we're matching it to is also our dialogue model. So what I'm going to do back up here when we load in our model, remember this is our model loading section. So let me actually make a note here. We need to change out our model file. So we'll use this data set, and we want to set this to whisper dialogue. Then we'll go ahead and run this. This should happen relatively quickly because there isn't a ton of data in here, right? There's like, I don't know, maybe a couple thousand sentences. Cool, so that's done. So we've now loaded in the correct model, because remember, we need to match dialogue to dialogue. If we were to feed the dialogue script into our mplug description model, we wouldn't really get the right thing, because it's not looking for dialogue, it's going to try to match it to a description. Okay, so now that I've got that, I can go ahead and scroll down, back down to where I saved out our dialogue. Sorry, I know this is a little bit of bouncing around. I'll try to clean up this notebook a little bit so it makes a little bit more sense as well. So now we've got this as our script lines. Now remember, the key is don't delete this, just replace what's in the brackets. And then we're going to run this again, which will just convert this script into our text. And then here we want to find our matches. Now this should give us very high scores, because we're literally pulling a dialogue from the previously existing dialogue. So it should, by default, give us basically back those clips. And sure enough, it does. So here we see, if we go to this very top here, you'll see each one of our clips has a score of 1.0. So it is pulling back in that. Now there's probably a way to do this where it wouldn't be based on sentence similarity. Like we could actually just go and like find those, but actually this works pretty quickly. We could in fact say instead create a conversation between two people talking about aliens. Limit the conversation to 20 sentences total. Put the conversation into a Python list. Okay, this is not really the best here, so let me just have them clean this up. So let's say put this into a Python list where each sentence is a list element. Okay. Now, the reason I asked about aliens was because I know my data set has the X files in it, and I know I've already processed that data in my data set, right? So this version, I should get sentence similarity scores that are not 1.0, right? Because there's no way that this exact dialogue is in there. Whereas in this one, there is exact dialogue. So if I want to match exact dialogue and basically have them say the exact same things from in my data set, then this is the way to go, is to feed it in the data set, have it pull it back out, and then do the matching there. If I wanted to generate a similar conversation just within the dialogue I already have, but it wouldn't match one-to-one, then what I could also do is then I could also feed in this and remove this conversation with aliens. So we've just got this. So there's a bunch of different ways to play with this, and this is why I think this week you'll kind of just play around a lot, is because you're going to want to explore different techniques here and see what you get out. So let's look at the scores for this. So I would hope that all of these are coming from the X files. And you'll see this score isn't bad, but you'll also notice that what's probably going to happen here is we're going to get a lot of repeats. So this is pilot scene 88. Let me just see. I bet you we're going to see this in a lot of places. Yep, 88, 88, 88. So this might actually be every single clip is going to be the same. No, okay, here we go. 319, 319, 252. Okay, so this is going to be a lot of repeats. This will actually be kind of funny. So maybe let's run this one, and we'll generate the video from this. We could, in fact, also generate the other video. Maybe I'll do that in a minute as well. But also this tutorial is running a little long. So let's just combine these. I'll stop the video, and I'll show you what we get out of this when this is done. Let's call this Aliens Dialogue. Okay, I'll be back in a minute, and I'll show you both videos. Okay, I'm actually glad I did that because I found a bug in my code that wasn't allowing me to repeat video clips. So that would have been bad. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we made. So here is our alien dialogue. This is the ChatGPT generated one. So this is not a matching one. You'll see we get some repeated clips.
You believe in the existence of extraterrestrials. You believe in the existence of extraterrestrials.
People that have made UFO sightings. They've reported unexplained time. People that have made UFO sightings. They've reported unexplained time.
The truth? I think those kids have been abducted.
Okay, so I'll upload this to Vimeo so you can watch all of it, but there you see it does, in fact, repeat clips. This one is our exact dialogue. So this shouldn't repeat clips, I don't think, because we're pulling from different pieces. Let's go ahead and play this one.
No. I need the old Blade Runner. This is bad.
How can you not know what it is?
If only you could see what I've seen, I've seen what I've seen. More human than a human is all I know.
What if I go north? Disappear? Would you come after me?
No, you won't, but somebody would.
It's too bad she won't live.
I can see you.
Kinda died.
Will you help us?
Okay, so I need to go through and actually look at the data that was produced from this. I'll put all of it in the Vimeo link so we can see how well it matches up with the dialogue. I would say these are not my most successful decisions or solutions. I think with dialogue, you really want to go in and write it yourself and maybe look at what you have available to you and then match with that. So some interesting examples. Maybe you'll generate something a little bit cooler than I did. Please feel free to share it in the Slack. I am going to stop the video here and make a new video for the video-to-video stuff, which is what we'll pick up next, because this tutorial is already quite long. So I'll leave it here, and we'll jump to the next section of our notebook in the next tutorial. See you there.